film, I went to what I call my real first film work. And I say real because my mother is indigenous person. I'm mestizo. My mother is indigenous person from the north coast of Peru. I'm Peruvian. I went to a community called Ancaca in the Andes. And I went to that community because it's the poorest community in Peru. And I chose to study that community, and I'm saying study at that moment. And I chose to study that community because I was one of the first community that received a community credit program that I helped to design. And what happened there, when I arrived there, you always think about the Andes as a beautiful, green. You think about areas close to Machu Picchu, don't you? Well, this place wasn't that. It was dry, was cold, the grass was thick. And from far away, the houses were close together. But when I arrived, the houses were very close, were very far away. And I couldn't get in any people's parcels and houses. And one of the interesting things is that the dogs started chasing me. So I couldn't get in any person's house. I think those dogs knew a lot about Hernando de Soto, ideas about property rights. I am not so sure how many of you are familiar with his ideas. I arrived to this community and I couldn't get into anyone's houses. And as I was walking, I went very early in the morning, and when I was walking to this community, I was getting hungry. It was all day. So I saw, okay, I am arriving to a harvesting time, and I will be all right. People can sell me potatoes, chullo, cheese. And the interesting thing is that I walk all over the place, and I keep asking people coming from the parcel, can you sell me anything? Can you sell me a little bit of potato? I was very hungry. And people will say, I'm sorry, but I cannot sell you. I don't have it. Maybe the next person has. And I keep walking and walking and walking. And I was wondering, what is happening with the people? I have learned from my NGO friends and from the university that development is money. That people, it's about profit. And what is going on here? How come people didn't want to send my money? Okay, there's something wrong. Well, a month later, I lived in that community for 2 years. A month later, I was working with the people there. I was making chullo. I'm doing all the chores in the agricultural fields. I was part of the community. I never used money. People took care of me, and I took care of the people. And what I discovered there is that really I was in a wealthy community. In one way, we call it poor, but in another way, it was very wealthy. And as Megan was saying, there was a local currency. The local currency, this is a wealthy community in some ways. The local currency was all the system of reciprocity. The Ani, the Minga, the Faere, right? There was a whole system of reciprocity. And I went there to study how the credit system worked. And actually, what I discovered, again, as Megan was saying, was a whole system, the monetary economy, which is a tiny little bit. What was important was a whole solidarity economy, and social networks that keep going back and forth. So as a mestiza, I came to Ancaca like a lot of outsiders with a kind of modernization theory built in. And what I mean by modernization theory, I mean that many people think the standard economic development, the development happens in stages. And we all will go there. And that's why that word's developing, underdeveloped, right? This idea that everyone will go in the same way. And what I learned in Ankanka taught me what is valuable to a society isn't just about getting more material things. Market system, because what we have here is a historical thing new called market system. We have had through history, María was saying too, Asian economies. And the market system is one type of market. This is the only way to bring what is valuable to a society. The economy, society, culture, and nature are interwoven. Over my long 2 years in that community, I saw so much about ritual. All the rituals at funerals, Megan, you were talking about that. The new haircut of a child, all involve economic activities, but in different ways. This was an economy that was embedded, and that's a big difference. This is an economy where what we distribute, what we produce, is mandated by other kind of considerations, social, cultural considerations. So it's not only the economy, and that's what mandates everything, it's the social and cultural that mandates what we do. And what happened with modernization? Modernization now looks blinds us to different kind of values that society might want and aim at, and the different ways that we are bringing what is valuable. I prefer to talk about provisioning. That's what I talk. We are about provisioning. And what are the consequences of this modernization outlook? Modernization theory is alive, and it's the denial. And I would say it's killing these economies. And it's the assumption that well-being is all about having more material things. Consumerism is about copying one idea of what is the developed society. And there is tremendous pressures on indigenous people to integrate. There are, as María was saying, lots of sufferings. Lots of suffering in my communities, lots of suffering in these communities, but tremendous pressures to integrate, right, and into a mainstream economy. And we say that's the only way. And we say no, there are times, I'm sure in the last days here, you have been looking at different models. And we can say with our heads up that there are thousands of alternatives. And the sad thing is that there are many communities that are seeking alternatives because they see the material suffering of their people. And they go and talk with academics, with policymakers, and the policymakers, unfortunately, just say there is only one way. The sad thing is that people, and I have seen many communities, and I feel very sad when I see many communities going sometimes to even my colleagues and say, well, there is one way, and people get torn between the wish for a better life, because indigenous people everywhere have been impoverished by a system of colonization. And so they are torn between the wish for a better life and the reclamation of tradition, language, art, forms of spirituality, justice systems, traditional justice systems, and traditional economies. That's a very sad situation. There is something called entrepreneurship, and there are narratives about developing. Narratives in the newspapers, narrative everywhere. We need to develop the entrepreneurial spirit among indigenous people. And I get upset about that. And I get upset because it's assuming that indigenous people don't have entrepreneurial spirit. It's assuming that indigenous people don't have economic systems. And now we create all these different programs and try to say, let's teach them. And there is nothing now, but there is a lot of money for indigenous training, development, education, and see, it's a key. There is nothing bad about that. But that education is often seen, is based in ethnocentric models of entrepreneurship that assumes the homo economics, that assumes that we are all individual profit maximizers, that assumes this modernization approach. I was in Rocky Inlet up north, and I was interviewing and talking with many people, caribou hunters, and the Rocky Inlet elders told me how horrible is this entrepreneurship programs now there, because young people are being torn apart, families torn apart between this collective, this if we are well, our community are well, and between that and the individual kind of outlook that is promoted. And the short story is that modernization doesn't look at what is already there, and it's dismissed as a no real option. How many times many of us in our work say, interesting, but no real thing. And there are different ways of doing things. And living and working among Andean people for many years and other communities, I saw novel and evolving ways of enterprise and provisioning that arise from the culture. I am a firm believer that culture and economics go hand by hand. So this is what I have seen, and it's called community-based enterprise, autogestionaria, is self-management, okay? And I see it among Aymara and Quechua peoples, and in other places too. And of course, the Aymara and Quechua people have a long history of colonization. There are differences, but a long history of colonization. But a strong, very strong sense of resistance. And most of all, they have taken care of their solidarity economy. Those are alive. So when I see these community-based enterprises, is the community acts collectively as entrepreneur. So it's collectively they look and search for alternatives. And collectively, they are also the organization. Usually we separate that. And there is an organization aimed at producing goods and services. And they do that under using their own social structures, their own traditions, their own governance, ancient traditions. They are walking and making the road at the same time. And economic goals are important, but there are means. And there are means to social, cultural, environmental, and political objectives. My Maya friends say, sure, we engage in fair trade, we engage with networks, but we have a political goal as an ethnic group. We have our political goal, and our political goal is to avoid the genocide that they have suffered, and they are under threat all the time. So, what brings people together to mix the old with the new and to survive in this sometimes difficult environment? There are different ways, and some of these communities have been triggered and have tremendous social, economic, environmental, and political stress. Some of the communities I have lived on have been in the stress of the Chinese Pact, guerrilla movements in the 80s, in the 90s, and they have to come back and rebuild their communities. And what you see usually is they draw shared cultural heritage, values, the values of common good, the values of common patrimony, right? And they have a spirit of collective action. They have been together, working for the common good. They have been together protesting for peace, protesting for water, for electricity. And they have huge deposit of social capital, huge practice of solidarity economy. And they take advantage of community skills. It's not that someone come and teach them and they go. They have their own community skills. And they are depending on community participation, huge sense of citizenship, huge honor and duty around citizenship. And they are rooted in markets and no-market activity. And that's something that we forget often. In the business schools, in economics, we have such a narrow way of understanding economics. And we don't look the other side, the non-monetary aspects of provisioning. When we talk about indigenous communities, it's holistic. I think some of you say that. It's holistic. Everything connects. And they do this. They connect different parts of their activities as a community, not as individuals, as a community.
Señorita Zulma, Chaimanta, tercer regidor, Cayan, señora Sebastiana Ramos, Cayan, Titijana Manta, Cajiatas, Casellantas, compañeros, sí.
So, when I talk about reciprocity, community economy, there are many achievements that these communities have had. And I'm talking about many communities I have been working over the last 25 years. Food security have achieved a sovereignty in these communities, job creation. The social and cultural organizations have been strengthening. The small business, extended families and community associations have created an umbrella for other kinds of development and activities. Regional development, in many cases, they have been the actors in bringing water and electricity to their communities. Security. In the times in the 80s and the 90s, where it was very difficult to travel through the Andes, I never felt secure in any place but in these communities. Civic democracy. We have the Occupy movement. We want economic democracy. We feel that every day we don't have control of our lives. Well, they have achieved something there. They have achieved some degree of civic democracy. They control over their lives in some ways. And I argue that these kind of initiatives, where they have mixed the old practices to evolve in the very complex and difficult global economy, can be an instrument for poverty alleviation. There are challenges, internal pressures and external pressures. Internal pressure caused by mainly by young people that go to universities, young people to go and get a growing education. Education is good, but sometimes we don't do it well. In this case, some young people say, what about these goals? Why we have multiple goals? Why we have, Indians, they themselves say that, managing our enterprises, our community enterprise. And we need to separate, it's all result of this bad education. And we have external pressures. The global economy, cheap products coming from everywhere. And we have governments that don't understand what is community enterprising. And multinationals mining Mining is a big threat for many indigenous communities in Latin America and everywhere, because really can destroy some of these living economies. So where do we go from here? I think academics and policymakers begin by recognizing the cultural and economic diversity as a potential engine for development. We need to recognize that there are many economies and different economic systems. And we need to nurture already what is there. And we need to choose not to look away as a whole society. There are many things happening, and we choose comfortable to ignore it. Muchas gracias.